Organize Me Radio, Episode 18, Life Transitions. I'm Naeemah Ford Goldson. Welcome to Organize Me Radio. I'm Naeemah Ford Goldson, and today's guest is Amelia Pleasant Kennedy, owner of A Pleasant Solution in Michigan. Welcome, Amelia.
Hi, thanks for having me.
All right, Amelia. So we're just going to get right into the questions. Tell us, how did you get your start as a professional organizer?
So I actually did things in reverse. I did a bit of learning before I started my business. So I joined the National Association for Productivity and Organizing Professionals in the fall of 2018 and jumped immediately into taking classes and learning. So I earned my specialty certificate in residential organizing, household productivity, and life transitions. And then I started working at the Container Store. I really wanted to get a sense of what real life problems people were having, what products were out there, and find those solutions. So I actually learned how to do the closet design as well. So I've just always enjoyed customer service, and I love that transformational process that can occur with working with clients. And then I joined my local NAPO chapter in Michigan here, and I participated in some of the group activities. We did a messiest room contest, which was super fun. Yeah. So we did some team building and volunteer hours. And then, that's kind of when my business really started taking shape. I'm now the chapter vice president. So since May of this year, I've been the vice president. And then I'm also a member of the Institute for Challenging Disorganization and NABPO, the National Association of Black Professional Organizers.
I love that. So you started with the Container Store, and I love how you started taking classes and joining organizations first, because when I started, NAPO was the only organization around. ICD was around too, which I joined later, which helped me become a certified professional organizer. But I think it's definitely smart to make sure you take the classes and you have the know-how, because a lot of us are, people who have been organized, maybe the majority of our life, or maybe kind of just fell into it because we have people in our families that might not be so tidy, which is my case, but I've been organized my entire life because people in my family are not so tidy. But you working at the Container Store, I completely agree with that. I was a contained home organizer for the Container Store, and that's also where I learned like design and everything like that. So I am right there with you on that front. I think that's a good path to go for someone interested in becoming a professional organizer. So I think it's great that you shared that, because there are a lot of people who might just jump into it, and then once they're into it, like, okay, what do I do? What do I do now? So I definitely think that's awesome. Tell us about A Pleasant Solution. How did you come up with the name?
So my maiden name is actually Pleasant. So you can imagine, as I was younger, people would often ask me if that was my personality. So A Pleasant Solution started in October of 2019, and I just started with general residential organizing, and then I really niched down into life transitions. So moving, returning to the workforce, downsizing, aging in place for seniors, becoming a caregiver, blending or divorcing households, people who are really kind of going through a major change, which involves emotions, as well as that need to get organized. And then I became a certified life coach during the pandemic. I believe that there's like a need for emotional support alongside those processes. And so we feel like we can do it all.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We show up for our kids, we take care of our parents, we manage virtual schooling, and I've learned tools that can help us really prioritize and help my clients be clear about what they can realistically accomplish and, the things that really move our families forward without that overwhelm. And it's important that we as mothers and caregivers don't lose ourself, like our sense of self through it all.
That's definitely important because through this pandemic, I feel like I've been pulling my hair out the entire time. Like it's a struggle. It's hard. And so for someone to be able to have a life coach through it, I think it would be great. I've been surviving on therapy myself. I don't know, how I would have coped without it. I don't know how people are coping if they don't have a life coach or if they don't have a therapist. So I definitely think that's a great skill for you to offer people. And I hope people really start taking, their mental health seriously and really, making sure that they're doing things to make sure they are okay. How has your personal experiences affected the way you run your business?
Yeah, so that's actually an important question for me because a handful of years ago, I started noticing changes in my mother's memory. And, I began chatting and joking about it with my brother and then with her. And I just kind of said, what do you think about moving a little closer to me? Like, what are your next plans for the next couple of decades? Because I wasn't 100% ready to accept that something was actually happening, but I really wanted to open the door with her to see if that truly was what was ahead for us. So in the winter of 2018, one of my mom's friends actually spoke up about the changes, someone who had been spending time with her every day. And that was really valuable input for myself and my brother, because it became clear that the need for support was definitely more pressing. So she was diagnosed with dementia. And in that time, she'd been living alone for a couple decades. She'd become chronically disorganized. She was losing her initiative to kind of keep up with the housework, driving less and less, and short-term memory was really interrupting her day-to-day activities. So my brother and my sister-in-law and we had a multi-day visit with her to ask her like what were the next steps and what she wanted. And so I really believe that there's like a power of with keeping our parents at the center of that kind of decision making as we move forward and helping them retain their agency for as long as possible. So a pleasant solution has really become my vehicle for showing families that there's real value in having those difficult conversations early. And like when the sailing is smooth, when things are easy, to have some of those tough conversations. So making those decisions about decades worth of possessions, making an estate plan, organizing documents, talking about aging in place or downsizing is so much easier before there's a family emergency.
I can't even imagine what you must be going through dealing with that. Like it has to be so hard to process the fact that your mother has dementia. My mother, I I don't know, what my family would do if that happened because it's 8 of us. And we don't have a plan. We don't, if my mom gets some kind of diagnosis such as dementia in a few years or whatever, of course I don't want to speak that over her, but it's life and it could happen. We wouldn't know where to start. So do you have clients where they don't even know where to start? Like what would someone do if something like that happened and they had no plan in place?
So for me, what I hope to offer is really that roadmap. For me, I felt very alone. I just turned 40 this year. So at this age, to become a caregiver is really quite a surprise. But we caught it early on enough to begin to ask her questions, get her involved, and help track down her finances, help navigate getting permissions to have access to her information. So I feel like the earlier you can have those conversations, the better. And it's hard to create a sense of urgency when we don't like to think about that negative possibility in the future. And so I encourage people to just start with that conversation, because even if your parents, even if your loved ones are closed off at first, the more you make it normal, the more you make it safe. And we're not deciding today. We're just beginning to say, hey, where do you keep all of your financial records? Where do you keep that information? You don't have to give me the passwords yet, but just so in case something happens, we know where to go. We know who your insurers are. We know where your will or your estate plan is held. So it's just starting that conversation.
So, as a life coach, what are some things you do to help or to encourage your clients?
Yeah. So just like organizing, as a life coach, I meet clients like where they currently are in their lives. My belief is that we're 100% whole and lovable, 100% capable of unlimited potential, and that we have all the answers inside of ourselves. So I use a tool that I learned at the life coach school called the model. And what we do is we separate the story that we've been telling ourselves from the facts at hand. So when we talk to family members, to friends, folks like to agree, disagree, buy into our story, buy into our problem or our current situation. And as a life coach, my job is really to create a safe, non-judgmental space where people can just come and breathe, create awareness about how they're thinking about a problem that's at hand, and then figure out whether that system of thinking is really working for them at any given time. Does that belief move you forward? Does it keep you stuck in place? When we take time to slow down and really process and think about how our perspective is creating the results in our lives, we just begin to see like all of the other options, other possibilities, and how every step that we take every day is really a choice. And we can remind ourselves how we are amazing humans and we can create space for ourselves. We can prioritize and really create an intentional life that leads to activities that we love.
I feel like everything you're saying is so like enlightening, and in my head it's like all these light bulbs are going off. It's like yeah. I feel like you should do a TED talk on this. Like I really do. So okay, so we're about 7 months into this pandemic. It seems like it's never going to end. I don't know like when, if there's an end in sight or what, but how do you help your clients deal with emotional overwhelm and all the things that have, come along with this pandemic?
It's real, right? That emotional overwhelm.
Right.
So, worry, confusion, indecision, mild anxiety, they're all totally normal human emotions, but they do nothing to move us forward. They're kind of like our brain's mechanisms to keep us safe and keep us from taking action that potentially may harm us. So my job as a coach is to really reassure clients that there's no right decision. There's no right way. For example, it took me a couple weeks to really make the first call to visit assisted living facilities for my mother. I was stuck because I felt like making that call meant accepting her diagnosis.
Mm.
And taking that first step is really hard. It's hard to make changes in your home. It's hard to become organized. It's hard to let go of decades worth of belongings. But honestly, worrying about it, thinking about what you're going to do next makes it much harder. Making a decision and having your own back are really, truly the easiest next steps to like release yourself from this emotional overwhelm. And it can be really challenging when you're in it, when your house is full of clutter, when you have to make a decision about a parent or a loved one. And that's where a professional organizer or a life coach can really help come in and support you through that process.
So, what steps do you take to help caregivers and clients manage their schedules and things of that nature?
Yeah, we start by uncovering where they are. What are your current beliefs about how things should be? We look at the tools that they're currently using and determine what is or isn't working for them. Most people think if they get the right planner, the right tool, that's the key, right?
Mm, mm-hmm.
But I often find that it's our brain getting in the way,
Mm.
right? We're meant to seek pleasure, avoid pain, and find the easiest way to get something done. And that's why we avoid and procrastinate. So, for caregivers in particular, it's like a double whammy. We've got our own lives, and now we're responsible for somebody else's schedule, their finances, medications, and it can be this informational overload almost.
Mm-hmm.
So, we start with determining current priorities, making self-care non-negotiable, right? Taking time to recognize how important it is to process our feelings and our emotions. And through that, you really regain that focus on your current lifestyle and what matters today, right now.
I think that's great that you mentioned the self-care thing because I feel like a lot of mothers especially, we don't focus enough on self-care. We feel like if we decide to, just sit down and binge watch a show, that we're not being productive enough, that we're not doing enough. We could be doing something else. I feel like with me, it's always like, what's next? What's next? What's next? What's next? And I really had to learn to take time to myself, which I'm still not even completely there yet. So I completely get that. And I'm trying to get there.
I even encourage people, I have to do this with myself. Block off free time in your calendar. Start with your free time because otherwise it'll disappear.
That's very smart. So I definitely need to do that because like you said, it'll disappear. Next thing you know, it'll be something on the calendar for the kids or your husband's doing something or whatever. So okay. I'm gonna work at that. I'm gonna work at that. All right. So how about a downsizing job? Have you done many downsizing jobs? How difficult is it to do a downsizing job?
So it really is a combination of patience and active decision making. So, like any new activity, you have to give a client the space to warm up to the idea, warm up to me, warm up to the idea of letting go, and to practice making those decisions because they need to be guided almost towards believing in themselves that they are separate from their lifelong, decades worth of possessions in their house. There needs to be a little bit of space to separate themselves from what they own. And once people see that I'm not going to tell them what to get rid of, right? I'm going to help
Mm-hmm.
them see how much space there is where they're going, prioritize what they're taking, and ask them really like, what is most important? What are the highlights? What are the key moments from your life? If there's anything negative, any sour memories, no sense in holding on to that. Even if something is worth a lot or it's expensive, if it's not getting used, it's not getting valued. And so it's clutter and it's just step by step.
So, have you ever had a client that was incapacitated in any way and just couldn't make any decisions? If so, how do you handle the decision making on that end for, keeping, donating, or tossing their things?
Yeah. So it's, first of all, I have not worked for someone who's physically incapacitated, but when a family member is experiencing dementia
Mm-hmm.
or perhaps there's two generations involved, first, the key is to decide who is the client, right? And who is making the decisions ultimately. And then it's really important to surround people with the items that spark memories. So Um, key items that are from events throughout your life, like photos, or an important object from an accomplishment or a vacation. It creates space for conversation and reminiscing. And the goal there is really to activate memory and not to overwhelm the person with objects. Less is definitely more. When we keep all the objects, keeping all the things, that's not necessary. Spending time with the person that you love, doing an activity that they love, and kind of just being willing to have the same conversation 100 times over, that's more important than the objects. So, helping people see the why behind the choices they're making.
So, do you have any favorite products that you use when you're working with these clients, or just in general, some of your favorite products for organizing?
Yeah, so I actually like function over form. So for aging clients, I really talk to them about making things accessible. So bringing them down to a height that they can reach in their kitchen or in their closet. I suggest the OXO pop top containers because that's good. If you have arthritis, you're not twisting.
I love those. Those are one of my favorite things too.
Yeah. Yeah. And like using a reacher or a grabber tool keeps clients from getting on a step ladder or bending over. And of course, clear bins remind everybody what they have, right? So you don't buy too much.
Right. What is your greatest achievement as a professional organizer?
I would be remiss to say, if I didn't say, that downsizing my mother was definitely a tremendous feat. So she was living in West Virginia, and I went and I sorted the entire contents of her home, items for donation, furniture for donation, other stuff for junk, for trash, and then everything she was going to bring to live nearby me in Michigan, paperwork, all of that. I did it in 2 weeks. It was this marathon days. And when she and I packed up to drive away from her home and move to Michigan, I couldn't believe that the work was really done.
Wow. Wow. I couldn't even imagine. Wow.
Yeah, it was intense, but it was such a relief, right? We make that decision and it's the best decision we've ever made. She's like 10 minutes down the road now. It's awesome.
Well, it's nice to have her closer, right? So I can only imagine how overwhelming it must have been during the time, but then you get it done and you were successful at it and now your mom is closer. So, at least you have that to look forward to, seeing your mom more often, right?
Yes. Yes.
So, Amelia, I think you need to write a book. I think you need to write a book and let us all buy the book because I'd buy it. I'd read it. And I really appreciate you being on today. Can you tell everybody how they can find out more information about you?
Awesome. Yeah. I am on Instagram and Facebook at A Pleasant Solution. And I'm on LinkedIn as well. And my website is www.apleasantsolution.com.
All right. Thank you so much, Amelia. I appreciate your time more than you know and all the insight that you've given us. It is greatly appreciated, and I know it's going to help somebody.
Yes, it was a total pleasure. Thank you.
All right, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Organize Me Radio. Tune in next week for an all-new episode. Thank you so much for joining me today, and make sure you follow me on all social media platforms. And remember, get organized, go further. You're listening to Organize Me Radio. I'm Naeemah Ford Goldson.